Welcome to today's webinar, What Can We Do to Advance Walking and Walkability, hosted by the Maryland Department of Planning and this is actually our first Walktober webinar, My name is Michael Bayer. I'm the Manager of Infrastructure and Development at the Maryland Department of Planning and host of the Walktober Walkinar series. Walking is an activity that many of us take for granted. But as pedestrian accident rates continue to rise and access to safe pedestrian spaces is diminished, communities are recognizing that walking and improving the walkability of our neighborhoods requires public attention and action. Throughout October, the Maryland Department of Transportation, in coordination with several state agencies and other partners, is sponsoring a series of webinars or Walkinars to highlight how we can collectively rally around walking, an activity that is both central to the state's active transportation efforts and a critical component promoting public well-being. This is the first one in the series. Thank you for joining us today, and please visit www.mdot.maryland.gov/Walktober for more information about Walktober and to register for the 4 other Walkinars that we will be presenting this month. We are recording this webinar and will be posting it online next week. All participants today will receive an email with a link to the recording once it is posted. The Maryland Department of Planning also hosts a national webinar series in association with the Smart Growth Network on smart growth and planning topics, available for viewing at smartgrowth.org. We encourage you to visit the website and to subscribe to our e-newsletter for smart growth and planning news and to learn about our upcoming webinars. You can also find out about planning initiatives, planning tools, and educational opportunities in Maryland by visiting the Maryland Department of Planning's website at planning.maryland.gov. Viewers of this live event are eligible to receive 1.5 CM credits from the American Planning Association. To log your AICP credits, visit the American Planning Association's website at planning.org, log into your account, and search for the name of today's event, which is What Can We Do to Advance Walking and Walkability. You can also search for event number 920-6176. So to get started, our speakers today are Marty Baker, Ian Thomas, and Danielle Arigoni. Marty Baker serves as Deputy Director of Bicycle and Pedestrian Planning in the MDOT Office of Planning and Capital Programming. In this role, she has helped to launch several important initiatives, including collaborative efforts to promote transit-oriented development, smart growth, and neighborhood revitalization, as well as developing decision support and financing tools to support walkable and bikeable communities. She lives in Baltimore City, where she is able, with a bit of courage, to walk the walk and bike the bike on a fairly regular basis, and so can speak from experience about the joys and dangers of being an urban pedestrian and cyclist. She has 2 master's degrees and a PhD from the University of Michigan. Ian Thomas is the state and local program director with America Walks. In this role, he develops and delivers educational programs for advocates, professionals, and elected officials about the benefits of walkable communities and the strategies to create them. From 2000 to 2013, Ian served as the founding executive director of the PedNet Coalition of Columbia, Missouri, where he developed one of the largest walking school bus programs in the country, coordinated a campaign that led to Columbia adopting the first complete streets policy in Missouri, and was instrumental in reducing neighborhood speed limits. He is a member of Smart Growth America's Local Leaders Council and the National League of Cities Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Danielle Arigoni is the Director of Livable Communities at AARP, where she works to support AARP state offices and the nearly 500 localities in several states enrolled in the AARP network of age-friendly states and communities to create great places for all people of all ages. Danielle leads the team responsible supporting age-friendly network members and develops a number of programs, including a dissemination of newsletters on livable community-related issues. She is an urban planner by education and has nearly 20 years of professional experience contributing to sustainable and resilient federal, state, and local policy. She holds a master's degree in regional planning from Cornell University and a bachelor's degree in planning from the University of Oregon. Following their presentations, Marty, Ian, and Danielle will answer as many questions as time permits. You can submit a question anytime during their presentation by using the questions tool in the control panel located on the right side of your screen. And before we get started with the actual presentation, we have a brief video, if I can get it to go here, from MDOT Secretary Greg Slater. Apologize for that. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Now I'm going to turn it over to Marty to get us started today.
Thank you, Michael. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you're good. Thank you.
Great. Well, hello, and thanks for joining us for Walktober. We're very excited to help launch our month-long exploration of how to advance walking and walkability in Maryland and beyond. The stresses of today have for many helped to heighten our sense of how important safe walking opportunities can be. As Secretary Slater noted, for many of us, walking is something that we do without thinking about it. We've also seen, however, that safe walking environments don't just happen. And in far too many neighborhoods and for all too many people, accessibility to safe walking routes are not available. So for the month of October, or as Governor Hogan of Maryland has declared it, Walktober, we're encouraging people of all walks of life to get out and to approach the effort in a very deliberate way, to contribute towards not only your own physical and psychological well-being, but to partner with others in and around our communities to consider how planning and other collective actions can work to make safe walking opportunities more accessible to everybody. Over the course of Walktober, which includes several walking opportunities across the state coordinated by our partners, you'll be hearing from many walks of life: advocates, planners, scientists, health professionals, and practitioners. And we'll be sharing a broad range of resources, data, techniques, and toolkits to set the table for some collective problem solving and action to support and celebrate walking in Maryland. We named this first session, What Can We Do?, because we saw this as an invitation for collective problem solving and a call to action, whether this means partnering with planners and advocating for change, or simply finding ways to get yourself and maybe others in your neighborhood to walk more often. So we'll start with Ian Thomas of America Walks, who has been collaborating with groups and agencies across the country to share his insights and resources to help set the table for a month of walking and public problem solving around how we can all walk better, walk safe, and walk more. To you, Ian.
Thank you so much, Marty, and thanks, Michael, for the screen share. Let me make sure that I have this in, is that showing in full screen mode?
Yes, it is.
I believe it is. Okay, great, thanks. Well, Marty and everybody, what a pleasure to be here for the kickoff event for Maryland's Walktober celebration. I really want to give a lot of kudos to the state for being such a leader in promoting walking and walkable communities and smart growth development. America Walks has had a partnership with various government and non-government organizations in Maryland for quite a few years. In 2018, we and Walk to Connect came and delivered a number of community workshops for the Maryland Department of Health. More recently, Marty, you participated along with colleagues from the Department of Health and AARP in our State Walking Ambassadors program. And right now, I'm actually working with the Somerset County Department of Health for a Safe Routes to School program and plan that we're going to develop early next year. And for a Department of Transportation to lead an event like this focused on walking and walkable communities is really exciting for us because not many states are doing that. So we're going to ask today, what can we do to promote walking and walkable communities? And I'm going to talk about those two elements as sort of mutually reinforcing strategies that will lead to healthy communities, equitable communities, safe communities, and economically profitable or successful communities. I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about the organization I work for, America Walks, and then talk about this interaction between walking and walkable communities, and then give you three short success stories based in different kinds of communities: a big city, a small rural community, and a mid-sized college town, just as some examples of what communities can do and what government agencies working with advocacy organizations and the general public can do. And finish up with some graphics that I borrowed from Dan Burden about redesigning streetscapes to really make them walkable, and finish off with some resources. So America Walks is a national education and advocacy organization focused on increasing walking and expanding walkable communities all across the United States. Right now, more than 41,000 people receive our newsletters, participate in our social media. Many of them attend our webinars, our free webinars. And when I mentioned that number of 41,000 was only about 10,000, as few as 6 or 7 years ago, I hope that gives you some idea of how much growing desire there is across this country to walk and to redesign neighborhoods and communities so that they are safe and enjoyable for walking. So our theory of change, as I mentioned, focuses on these two elements. We organize events and programs. We deliver communications and education around the benefits of walking. And that way we get people out doing the act of walking where it's safe and enjoyable to do so. Then we engage those people in the much more difficult challenge of changing policy, allocating public funding, and rebuilding infrastructure to make walking safe and accessible everywhere. And as we do that, we create more great places for the walking programs. And we like to kind of keep this cycle rotating from one element to the other. We do this in a number of ways. We have free webinars every month, or quite often twice a month. Our Walking College program is an intensive 6-month training for advocates, mostly online, in how to be an effective walking college advocate. And I will mention that we made a special arrangement with the Maryland Department of Health a couple of years ago to provide fellowships for 6 of their county health educators to participate through the Walking College. We deliver state collaborative workshops where we bring together the State Department of Transportation, State Department of Health, other agencies such as the State Department of Planning, Natural Resources, Parks and Recreation, Aging, and so on, to brainstorm and develop a plan for making the state more walkable. And we have a Walking Towards Justice series where we take a specific social or racial justice situation that has a bearing on community design and livability and quality of life for people, and really dig into those difficult topics to peel back the layers of systemic discrimination and move us forward to a more equitable society. And finally, we do a national walking summit periodically. The last one was in St. Louis just before everything shut down. And we're now starting to plan a virtual National Walking Summit for early in 2021. So walking programs to walkable communities. I borrowed this graphic from Walk to Connect, our partner based in Denver, Colorado, that builds sustainable walking programs. And this shows all of the different tremendous benefits, individual benefits and community benefits of walking. There are lots of kinds of walks that can be organized: walking school buses, senior walks, and I'm delighted to be on this panel with Danielle Arigoni with AARP. Walking is the single greatest thing that older adults can do in order to maintain their health and enjoyment of life, and we have to create the environments where that's easy and safe and enjoyable. Walk with a Doc is a wonderful program led by physicians all across the country. Here's a hike. I don't know if anybody has walked any of the Camino de Santiago, but it shows how embedded the act of walking is in our spirituality and our very essence as human beings. And you can have some fun with walking as well. And this is one of Walk to Connect's events, the glow-in-the-dark dance walks that they host periodically. The bridge from walking to walkability possibly starts with the idea of a walk audit. And this is when a group of advocates and bringing along some public officials to look at the walking conditions. And this, of course, is a terrible walking condition. This is in Northeast Denver, where the only way to get between a low-income housing development on one side of the highway and a lot of jobs that those people work in hotels and restaurants on the other side is to walk through what there is affectionately known as the Quebec Street slant. And through the process of walk audits, we can create checklists of what needs to be changed and deliver those to the officials. And I do want to mention, with Danielle being on the call, really the premier walkability checklist is the AARP walkability checklist, which There's also a number of one-pagers that were recently released by AARP, and I expect Danielle will be talking about those later. So as we transition to walkable communities, clearly a walkable community is one which invites people to get out and walk. It has to be safe. The traffic has to be going slowly and not be very noisy. You have to be able to get across roads. There has to be interesting destinations and interesting streetscapes to look at. Honestly, that's how we always used to design communities in the early part of the 20th century. And we went a little bit off the rails in the sort of expansion of the automobile culture era. But we're moving back and figuring out how to redesign these communities that just invite people to get out and walk. We know it'll have tremendous benefit for our health. Several years ago, I worked with a collaborative in Montana involving the Department of Transportation, Public Health, Commerce, and the advocacy group Bike Walk Montana to come up with a framework for the benefits of walkable communities. And I'm not going to look at all of these, but we created a statement, they really created a statement for each of these elements of equity, mobility and access, health and the environment, quality of life, economic vitality, and safety. Here's the statement for equity. Walkable communities equitably support the transportation needs of residents and visitors of all ages, abilities, income levels, races, and national origins. And here we are for economic vitality. Walkable communities are economically vital because they attract a talented workforce, offer a more diverse retail market, and reduce public and private costs. So there's a range of benefits for walkable communities. And honestly, if as an elected official or as the administrator of a large state or local agency, you can do one thing to improve your community, making it walkable is probably it, because the benefits are cascading. So I'm going to just tell three stories here, three quick stories, and move through these fairly quickly. The first is in a big city, the city of St. Louis, a traffic calming lending library. And the story focuses on Faye Page Edwards, who was one of our Walking College Fellows back in 2015. Faye is also a Girl Trek organizer, and I'm sure most of you familiar with Girl Trek, but it's a wonderful national organization that focuses on encouraging African-American women and girls to build walking into their daily life, both as a health benefit, but also as a self-empowerment benefit. And it's an incredibly successful organization in achieving its goals. So Faye was with Girl Trek. She joined America Walk, the Walking College. She developed a goal for her city to reduce the speed of traffic in neighborhoods, because she saw data like this showing that when a pedestrian is hit by a car more than 20 or 30 miles an hour, the likelihood that that collision will be fatal dramatically goes up. And if we can just keep speeds down to 30 miles an hour, even better, 20 miles an hour in areas where pedestrians are around, especially children and older adults, we can save a lot of lives. And she campaigned throughout the city. She teamed up with another advocacy organization called TrailNet, and they ran into an issue that the city of St. Louis made it illegal for neighborhoods to install speed humps or road narrowings or traffic circles. Anything that slowed down traffic was actually prohibited. It turned out that the St. Louis alderman and city council really didn't support this approach. So there was general political support to change that, but it still took a lot of effort. And Faye was one of the leaders of that campaign to reverse that ordinance that prohibited traffic calming. Having done that, Faye then worked with TrailNet and neighborhood groups to start developing temporary traffic calming projects using inexpensive and fun materials and engaging the community in designing and constructing and installing these elements that were all designed to slow traffic down and make it much more appealing and fun for pedestrians. It was a very positive program which built relations between the neighborhood associations and the city, and eventually led to some research showing that the speeds really did come down when these temporary installations were put in. And as a result, the city then agreed to start making some permanent traffic calming installations, something that had never been done before, and a very satisfactory outcome for these communities. So that's an example of a big city story, maybe for some of the communities in Maryland that have neighborhood organizations and have a problem of speeding in neighborhoods. The second one is a small rural community, and this focuses on the city of Batesville, Arkansas. Here are the key takeaways from this story. Car-oriented sprawl and high vehicle speeds have led to the decline of rural main streets. And I know from my visits to many of the rural counties of Maryland that this is a problem in your state. Small town mayors are very effective community champions for Main Street revitalization projects. And I've seen that actually in the city of Salisbury. And walkability improvements in rural downtown districts can catalyze not just pedestrian activity and health, but economic development. So Batesville is a town of 10,000 in northeast Arkansas. It's the oldest living city in the state. It was actually the second city incorporated in Arkansas, but the first one ceased to exist at some point. So Batesville's the oldest, and it's right on the White River, as illustrated here. Now, this is how Main Street Batesville looked in 2014. Almost 50% of the retail buildings were empty. Even those that were occupied really only operated from about 10 till 4 or something. It was the government center it was the county seat. It is the county seat. City and county government and the courthouse were there. And so the businesses served that working community, but after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, everything was shut down. Mayor Rick Ellenbow was the catalyst for the change which occurred in Batesville. Before becoming mayor, he was the PE instructor for the school district, and he was distressed by the fact that a lot of the children, the teenagers that he coached, left Batesville and had no interest in coming back. He thought the town was going to die. So when he ran for mayor in 2007, and he's still the mayor now, 13 years later, it was his goal to revitalize Batesville so it was a place that young people wanted to live. He worked on some recreational projects like the water park illustrated here, a trail system, and then he turned his attention to downtown Batesville, where he partnered up with the other main character in this story, Bob Carius. And Bob is a retired Navy admiral, and at this time he was the president of the Main Street Batesville organization. And he was very focused on revitalizing the Main Street and the downtown district. So in 2014, they brought Dan Burden, who you may have heard of. If not, he is sort of the grandfather of walkable communities, been doing this since, I think, the 80s. And I had the privilege of working with him on this project. We came and we did some walk audits. We had a lot of community engagement efforts and came up with a Main Street walkability and revitalization plan. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are sort of the recommendations that we gave the city of Batesville based on the public input that we heard from the community, from the business community, from the public health community there, from the schools and ordinary residents. And it was in these different categories of the 100-day challenge and then short-term, mid-term, and long-term changes. Here's another shot of Main Street in 2014. And this is the image that we gave them with that report based on what we'd heard. And I'm going to go back and forth a couple of times here. You can see that Main Street was a one-way street with 2 lanes of traffic, parking on both sides, although not many vehicles were parking. And we recommended, based on what we heard, converting it to a one-way street with angled parking and a lot of texture and color and landscaping, which is the environment that is going to attract pedestrians to want to park their car, or drivers to want to park their car and get out and become pedestrians and walk and shop. So amazingly, Batesville pretty much embraced all of the recommendations we made and got to work very quickly. They raised some money. The local business community put some money in, the community banks in particular, and they redesigned Main Street almost exactly the way recommended. They brought in grants to improve the shop fronts. They developed small pocket parks and public spaces in areas where the buildings were absent, or where there was a space that could be fairly inexpensively improved to be an attractive space for pedestrians. And the transformation was remarkable. Within just a couple of years, all of those vacancies had been taken by retailers wanting to set up shop on Main Street. 21 new businesses opened, 4 new buildings were constructed for restaurants, new apartments were constructed in the upstairs spaces which had been empty for decades. The downtown theater, which had been closed for decades, was renovated and reopened, and property values went up, providing additional taxes for the city that helped pay for a lot of the improvements. This is the Barnett building, the oldest building in Batesville, over 100 years old, again, had been shuttered for decades since the decline of the downtown area in the late 20th century. And in about 2016, the county library, which had moved out to the suburbs, moved back downtown, leased the Barnett building, invested over $3 million into renovations, and moved all of their books back downtown, bringing more and more people downtown who either walk downtown or drive downtown, park, and then walk around the town, really revitalizing the local economy. And lots of downtown events are now happening, of course, not right now with the COVID pandemic, although I think they're figuring that out, as many communities are. But it's been a remarkable transformation for a downtown district and a Main Street that were essentially dead just a few years ago. So I'm going to move to my final story here, focusing on Vision Zero as a strategy for improving walkability and making it safe for people to walk. Pedestrian fatalities have, this is actually not fully up to date, that number in 2019 was over 6,500, which is a 60% increase from 2009. And when you look at where the fatalities are happening, it's not evenly distributed. Poor families are much harder impacted by pedestrian fatalities. Whoops, I don't know, I lost, oh, there we go. Minority, racial and ethnic groups are much more impacted, and older adults are much more impacted, as I'm sure Danielle will be talking about, because of the way that we've developed our road infrastructure. This is what a lot of streets in a lot of cities look like, and it's clear why people who have no choice but to walk to get to work or essential services are dying at unprecedented rates with these kind of road designs, sprinkled often where people live, work, and play if they have that privilege. Vision Zero sets a goal of eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries. And the Vision Zero Network is the national organization which leads this effort. They track all of the cities across the country that adopt Vision Zero policies, and here in Maryland, Montgomery County has a Vision Zero policy, and there may be other communities. Again, I don't think this graphic is fully up to date, but I want to focus on the town where I live, Columbia, Missouri. We're in the middle of the state, halfway between Kansas City and St. Louis. We're a college town with a nice walkable downtown close to the university campus. We have trails, many of which are former railroad easements, but we also have very auto-oriented suburbs where it's really unsafe and unappealing to be a pedestrian. And then in 2014, we had a spate of pedestrian injuries and deaths. 4 people were killed and another 6 seriously injured within about 4 months. I was on the city council, I'm still on the city council, and I persuaded the mayor to set up a task force on pedestrian safety, and then ended up chairing that, or co-chairing that task force. And as we were doing that, Vision Zero as a movement was emerging in New York City, Seattle, San Francisco, a number of other cities across the US. And we took a close look at that. And that task force met for about a year, had a lot of different representation from the university, school district, hospitals, neighborhood groups, social services. And we came up with an overall recommendation to adopt a Vision Zero policy, along with a lot of other recommendations that fit under that policy. So here is our Vision Zero policy. The main goal is to eliminate traffic deaths and serious injuries in Colombia by 2030. These are the key factors that make up a successful Vision Zero policy. You need to state unequivocally that safety is the most important factor in transportation decision making, that traffic deaths and serious injuries are preventable and therefore ethically unacceptable, and that transportation systems should be designed and operated so that user errors are not fatal. So this is written into our code now at the city and guides how streets are planned and designed and built and retrofitted. The city staff, after the council unanimously adopted that policy, developed an action plan to accomplish it, at least for the first 3 years, and we're in the process of revisiting that. And here are some of the elements of that: setting up a public information portal about the Vision Zero program. So here we have all of the fatal and serious injury crashes over the last 10 years in Colombia. And one of the things you see immediately is that they are like little trains of locations along the high-speed highways, many of which in our case and in states across the country are owned and operated by the State Department of Transportation. So we did have Missouri DOT on our task force and very much involved in this program. We quickly passed a careless and imprudent driving ordinance to make it a crime to text while driving, and started working on road safety audits in specific locations as identified by those crash maps. So I'm sure I'm out of time and I'm going to wrap up quickly here. I want to just show some transformations, and I want to credit Dan Burden with these. He works with a graphic designer who created those images we saw in Batesville, and here are some more, just to give you an idea of what it takes to make a very car-oriented street or corridor into a walkable one. I'm just going to move these forward, and you can see how that same image, with the addition of a roundabout, a splitter island, a pedestrian crosswalk, and landscaping, can make all the difference. Here's another one, a very bleak looking area with an unattractive building, and although there's a wide sidewalk on one side, it's not a place anybody wants to walk. But look here, let's again add some landscaping, improve the building facade. A lot of this becomes a public-private partnership where the public investments initially in the streetscape lead to private investments, new buildings. You do need to have codes that ensure the kind of attractive buildings with windows and architectural features that make it an exciting and enjoyable place for pedestrians. But there are lots of examples of this, and here's the final one, showing again a rather bleak small town downtown street, a lot like Batesville, and what you can do with that to make it a place people want to be and want to walk. So I'm just going to finish off with some resources, and I will send all these links to Michael and Marty to share with you all. Smart Growth America produces an annual report called Dangerous by Design, which tracks pedestrian deaths and injuries, very important for making the case for some of these changes. NACTO has the Urban Street Design Guide, which really talks about designs for streets that benefit pedestrians and cyclists in a balanced way with automobiles. Project for Public Spaces has this excellent toolkit called Streets as Places, focused very much on those design elements that make streets great places for people to be. This is a fabulous book produced by the Colorado Department of Transportation, Department of Public Health and the Environment, and Department of Local Affairs, which guides small towns across the state of Colorado whose main street is also a state highway, how they can redesign that state highway legally and effectively to accomplish the many benefits of a downtown Main Street beyond just moving traffic. So a lot of the transformations that we saw in Batesville are being accomplished in Colorado through this guidance. And the AARP Livable Communities pop-up demonstration toolkit, pop-ups are such a wonderful way without expensive investments to test drive some changes. And generally, they become very popular. They achieve the goal of reducing speeds and increasing pedestrian activity. So I encourage everybody to do pop-ups. Finally, America Walks Technical Assistance Program. We provide a lot of guidance and workshops and policy development and plan development, kind of keying on our core competencies as an advocacy organization. And just give you a few examples of these. We do community workshops, walk audit training. Training lots of people to lead walk audits is a great way to then kind of cascade the benefit to more and more people to understand how to change street designs. Developing policies such as Vision Zero policies in partnership with local government, pop-up projects I mentioned before, and finally the State Walking College, which we have done in a number of states, New York State, Iowa. We're talking with the state of Idaho right now of redesigning the National Walking College program to help a state develop the expertise and the advocacy passion among advocates and professionals across the state to work with their state and local governments to make the state more walkable. So with that, I will hand over to Danielle, I think.
You're muted, Danielle.
Sorry, thanks. Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you, Marty. Thank you to the Secretary. Thank you to Francine Waters and all the folks here who are inviting us, allowing us to be a part of this really wonderful Walktober celebration. I know that I speak on behalf of our state colleagues in the AARP Maryland that we're really excited to be partners with you all in helping to make Maryland a safer place for all. I'm going to speak to you kind of from the national perspective. I run the national program on livable communities, which supports state offices all across the US. So I'll talk a little bit about why AARP does this work, what kind of drives us, and then also how some of this work is already has already taken on life in Maryland through many of our programs. So we always start from this slide. The reason that we at AARP care about how communities are formed is because we are very quickly approaching a date in time wherein we will be comprised as a country of more people over 65 than under 18 for the first time ever. And in fact, those demographic change, the speed with which we are shifting as a population is mirrored very closely in Maryland as well, where the State Department of Aging indicates that the Maryland 60+ population is going to increase nearly 40% between 2015 and 2030. That's not that far away, but that represents a very significant shift in who lives in our communities and how those communities work or don't work for people. So we really think about sort of the whole built environment and what are those components in place that either make it easy for older adults to live their best lives at every age or act as barriers for them doing so. And we know that across the board, there are a lot of indicators that suggest that the built environment as we're currently approaching it does not necessarily work very well for older adults. Everything from housing affordability to access to parks and public spaces to prolonged sense of isolation and loneliness that is a byproduct of our built environment. But for purposes of today, I really want to hone in on transportation. And one of the really key factors that's important for you all as advocates, as community members to know is that older adults outlive their ability to drive by anywhere from 7 to 10 years. And so when you think about that day when a person can no longer drive, chooses to no longer drive, it really poses a significant question as to, well, then what are the mobility options? To what degree are there other viable choices that allow someone to get to work if they still work, to get to their volunteer opportunity, to visit friends and family, to grocery shop, to recreate, to get exercise. We also know that older adults, and this is particularly significant, as Ian pointed out, older adults represent a disproportionate share of pedestrian fatalities in many states. I'm happy to say that Maryland is not one of those, but there are vast majority of states where, in fact, older adults do represent a disproportionate share. So that's kind of what really drives us with our Livable Communities work. Looking at in Maryland, in particular, we saw, I think there's a lot of wonderful work that's already underway, and I'll attribute that to the Secretary Department of Transportation and Marty and you all. That you have seen declines in Maryland in total pedestrian fatalities, but there have been an increase in the pedestrian fatalities as a share of traffic fatalities. So the problem is far from solved. There's still plenty of work to do. 16% of the pedestrian fatalities were people 65 and older, meaning they are certainly still victims of pedestrian fatalities, but it's not a significantly disproportionate share, which is good. But however, people of color are very much significantly disproportionately represented in pedestrian fatalities, as Ian pointed out. Similar trends on bike fatalities, and we often talk about bike and ped safety hand in hand, because we know that good bike infrastructure also supports better pedestrian infrastructure. And then we're talking about what are those non-motorized transportation options that can be available to people when they don't drive, or just because they want an alternative that's healthier. So I mentioned that Maryland is not one of those that is significantly disproportionate older adults, which is great. There is a very slight uptick in terms of the amount of pedestrian fatalities that are represented by older adults. So you're far from the most egregious example of this across the U.S., but that is nevertheless is a concern. And how can we really make sure that our built environment works, again, not just for older adults, but really works for everyone? And I would say that's very much behind our sort of approach, that we approach these issues with the needs of older adults in mind first and foremost. But our goal is really to support communities and local leaders to think differently about all of these things, housing and transportation and public spaces, so that they can create great places for people of all ages. That the popular sort of 8 to 80 refrain that we often invoke is a place that's good for an 80-year-old and that's good for an 8-year-old is going to be good for everyone in between, regardless of ability, regardless of whether they walk or roll or stroll. So we have a few programs that I want to kind of walk through, and I'll speak to these to the degree that they represent opportunities for you all as local leaders to plug into. If there are ongoing efforts, I invite you to learn more. And if they haven't yet made it to your town, I'd encourage you to maybe find ways to bring them there. So I'll start with our AARP Network of Age-Friendly States and Communities. This is a voluntary program that we run that invites localities to raise their hand and to commit to a process of becoming more age-friendly by thinking about those issues that I discussed, housing, transportation, public spaces, but also by thinking about things like how do older adults get their information and how can we make those channels more effective? How are we including older adults in civic life, through social participation activities, through volunteers and through work, through civic engagement, and how can we make those more effective and more reflective of our population? How can we sort of elevate older adults in our communities to make sure that they are respected, they are included, they are celebrated for the asset that they represent in the community? So that's a process that we run that communities can sort of self-select into. It requires commitment on the side of the elected official, either it's a mayor or a county executive or a council. We'll sort of commit to that work because it does take a while. It's a 5-year cycle that begins with asking older adults and members of the community, what is it that you need? What is it that you need this community to do differently in order to help you live your best life, in order to keep you here, keep you in your home, keep you engaged and healthy and happy? More than 100 million residents in the US right now currently live in a community that is working to become more age-friendly. And I will say the communities that have signed on to this network really range from very small rural communities. We have upwards of 70 of them in Maine alone, which are largely small rural places, all the way up to New York City and the County of LA, to where there are multi-million population groups that they're working to benefit and to advocate for. There in Maryland, there are 4 communities that have already joined in and signed on to the network and are underway now to undertake work to address all of these 8 domains of livability. And I want to sort of give them a special shout out because all 4 of them have already baked into their approach whether it's through their sort of intention or whether it's through their action plan, that they are working on pedestrian safety. They are working on making these communities in Maryland better and safer places for all. In Baltimore County, when the county applied to the network to join in, they specifically called out that they want to provide greater accessibility for older adults to public spaces and have more transportation options. Howard County named one of its 6 priorities is providing affordable, accessible, and varied transportation options for older adults. In Hyattsville, they're already midway through the process, so they've already done a lot of their assessment. They've converted what they've heard into an action plan, and their action plan specifically calls out pedestrian safety and addressing lighting and signals and street design as a way to improve pedestrian safety. Again, not just for older adults, but for everyone. And Montgomery County, similarly, they're midway through the process, and they have a specific action item to improve safety for pedestrians as well through sidewalks, lighting, crosswalks, and more. So, you know, I celebrate all of these 4 communities. I want to sort of commend them for their commitment and encourage you to learn more about what they're doing, as well as contemplate whether your community might benefit from joining the network and bringing that sort of focused attention to this work. I will say, the work in age-friendly, the age-friendly work is driven not just by a local government, it is very much driven by a very diverse group of stakeholders, and that's often the forum whereby the advocates for bike and ped safety, plus the advocates for you know, the senior center representatives or the area agency on aging come together to really work collaboratively over a multi-year process. So it can be a very effective way of bringing about change. Another thing that we do and that we offer is we offer training periodically all across the US. We just happened to have wrapped up our annual workshop this year where we focused on transportation. We had picked that theme many months ago, well before COVID, but it turns out that it was, you know, as timely as ever. Our transportation networks have undergone a massive disruption with COVID-19. We have seen the threat that has provided and presented to public transit. We've seen more people out walking and biking than ever before. We've seen different uses of automobiles as people work from home rather than commuting. And in the spirit of that, we brought people together over a 2-day virtual event to really talk about transit and safe driving, micromobility, bike and pet safety, and much more. And I think one of the powerful things about this workshop that I'd encourage you guys to check out, we have all the videos posted now, including our keynote speakers, is there are so many really wonderful local examples that can be brought to bear of what communities are doing to make driving safety for people, to improve access to public transit, but really to make sure that people are able to walk and bike more safely in their communities. So lots of good resources there that I encourage you to check out. The other thing that we do that I hope is helpful to you all as local advocates is we try to share new insights on 50+. And you know, I think one of the great assumptions about older adults is that they don't bike. For example, I am 50+. I am a biker. I am proud to say that I love my bike. I've biked for many years and plan to bike for many more. But we also wanted to make sure that that wasn't an anomaly. That in fact there are insights that can be gained from a national survey on 50+ bicyclists. So we just completed that a few weeks ago, and we have a few findings to share, which again I think speak to the value of thinking about bike and ped safety as 2 halves of the same whole, if you will. When older adults have someone to bike with, they're more likely to bike. COVID-19 has motivated a lot of folks to start biking again, or maybe dust off that bike that had been in their garage or their basement and bike more. Older adults really want access to that high quality bike network and fewer potential points of conflict. Again, those are the same points of conflict largely where the pedestrian fatalities are happening too. If you can solve for the conflicts with bicycles, you're also solving for a lot of the conflicts with pedestrians. And that just makes a safer environment overall. Older adults, as with pedestrians, want easily accessible places to shop and work and socialize. Those places where you can ride up and lock your bike or casually walk to, those are the kinds of places that people really want in their communities. We know that e-bikes are growing in popularity, particularly with riders' age, and that many older adults consider bicycling to be a staple in their lives and can't imagine ever stopping. So you all as walk advocates think too about how biking fits into your portfolio and how you can really leverage those advocates for cycling to help you achieve your own goals to create a more pedestrian safe environment. Another set of tools that we started to talk to, and I appreciate Ian's call out of these very much, is that we do issue and make available to anyone who, upon request, via download or print, a whole raft of print publications that can be very helpful, I think, to you and your work. So I'll focus on a couple here. We do have a lot of wonderful tools on housing and on parks, even on rural livability, but the things I want to focus on today are those that are most relevant to pedestrian safety. So Ian mentioned our Walk Audit Toolkit, which I do agree, it's a really wonderful resource in order to lead group walks on a walk to evaluate the pedestrian safety of pedestrian environments. Of course, not many of those group walks are happening these days, so we developed a sort of an individual worksheet-based approach that tries to synthesize most of what we talked about in the Walk Audit Guide into a one-page print from home guide that you can print out and do and walk in your neighborhood and apply. And what that does is it really helps you identify some of the factors and features that make a location feel comfortable, feel safe, feel accessible. It also very clearly helps you identify those gaps and those barriers, and that then becomes the basis for you and for your neighbors and for your community to advocate for more and better, more accessible pedestrian infrastructure. So we have a couple different sort of related worksheets there, one of which also asks you to evaluate who's using the street. Just take note of who's using the sidewalks and the crosswalks and the bike lanes, because those are the folks who are going to sort of see the benefit of, realize the benefit of an improved pedestrian environment. So I encourage you to check out either the guide or the walk sheets or both. And I will offer a little teaser here. We are in the middle of developing a walk audit app as well. So hopefully we'll have that in 2021. The second guide that Ian mentioned, which again, I appreciate, is our pop-up placemaking toolkit. And I think the stories that Ian shared of the local leaders and their creative solutions to bringing, quick and cheap and dynamic traffic calming, for example, to a community to make the case. That's exactly the spirit behind our pop-up placemaking toolkit. So this toolkit offers 30+ ideas for how you can sort of quickly and relatively inexpensively demonstrate change in your community. And that's everything from temporary bike lanes to creating traffic calming measures such as medians or traffic circles, painted crosswalks, all kinds of really creative, artistic, engaging ways to bring the community together to demonstrate the value of thinking differently about our public spaces. I think oftentimes people get locked in the sense that, in the case of this slide, that alley is always going to look like that alley. It's never going to look like a fun and safe and enjoyable place to spend time. Well, it turns out that it actually can be changed, and that can be done through relatively inexpensive efforts. In this case, it was a string of umbrellas that was cast about with some party lights and some paint on the ground, some patio furniture. That changes the way you think about a space. And I think that's really often the very first barrier, that you can't imagine that main street or that intersection or that sidewalk will ever look different, will ever function differently. But in fact, it can. And by using these relatively inexpensive demonstration techniques that we've developed in tandem with Team Better Block, that really, again, serves to make the case to your local leaders as to why these permanent changes are so needed. Finally, I want to touch base quickly, actually there's a couple more slides, touch base quickly on some of the grants that we've made in communities as well. So we also make direct investments in communities and in change, whether it's permanent or demonstrations. All around the US, we run something called the Community Challenge Grant Program. The vast majority of these quick action grants have gone to support changes to public spaces, such as signage and trail enhancements and parks and murals and artistic furniture, things like that. Many of them have also supported transportation, whether that's, again, temporary bike lanes or crosswalk enhancements or rideshare education programs, things like that. Upwards, just about $6 million in 4 years, many of which have gone throughout the state of Maryland. So I want to give a couple Quick shout outs. First, here's a few images of what we funded across the country, things like public art and things like colorful crosswalks. And again, some of these temporary demonstrations, whether it's bike lanes or public plazas. We've sponsored events like Ciclavia, which closes down the streets with regularity to get people out walking and biking and thinking differently about the streets as public space. We've also funded bike education programs for older adults. And in Maryland, there have been some really wonderful investments over the years to do just that as well. So in Annapolis, for example, we made a grant a couple of years ago to install artistic bike racks in the Arts District. A few years back in Pigtown there in Baltimore, we partnered with them to invest in a community gathering that would think differently about how to make a particularly challenging intersection more safe and more responsive to the community. So that was a wonderful opportunity to both engage the community in thinking differently about their built environment, but also to generate some ideas about how that could be done. And then even in Old Suburban Park, something as simple as, flags installed on light posts as a way of better indicating when pedestrians are crossing the street. Is that a permanent fix? No. Is it better than nothing? Yes. And what it does is it, again, builds awareness about the fact that that was a particularly dangerous and scary intersection for community members in that area. And to the degree that they had to use a red flag to indicate to cars that they were crossing, that is the kind of investment that, while it's temporary, it builds the awareness of street users, it builds the awareness of the community, and it builds the awareness with local leaders that a more permanent fix needs to be brought to bear there. Finally, there's a couple other tools I'll just point you to and invite you to check them out. We offer something called the Livability Index, which lets you look up your community and get sort of a relative score about how well you're doing at this point in time, using 60-something indicators that run the gamut from housing to transportation to environment. So I encourage you to check that out. That's available for just about every community in Maryland, as well as across the US. I mentioned our Age-Friendly Network program and our Community Challenge Grant program. If you're curious where those investments have happened across Maryland, you can use our Livable map, livablемap.aarp.org, to not only find out where those investments are, but also to learn more about them, as well as to search across other similar communities across the US. And finally, if you do nothing else, I would encourage you to sign up for our weekly newsletter by texting Livable to 50757. And what that does is it gets you a regular sort of injection of practitioner-focused material every Wednesday, more or less, that really brings to you innovative ideas that we've seen from across the country. It brings to you the latest and new resources that we're offering, including things like grant programs and free publications, as well as events like this. We try to drive people's awareness to events that can help them do their work as community advocates, as community leaders. So with that, I thank you for listening, and I encourage you to learn more about our programs, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have at the end.
Okay. Thank you so much, Danielle. Can everybody see the slide I've just put up?
Yes, you're good.
Great. Thanks, Danielle and Ian. You both raised some really creative approaches and resources for us to consider. So to wrap up this first webinar, I'll be bringing the conversation a little closer to home, focusing on some more Maryland-specific issues and resources, and sneaking in a little bit of transportation planning perspective to tether the discussion back to that core question: what can we do? But let me clarify at the start, as we emphasized at the beginning, our intent in bringing this question to your attention is not to answer it for you, but rather to engage you in a conversation about the kinds of public problem solving that we think walking and walkability require. So one of the great things about walking is it's people-powered, and if we're going to solve for better outcomes, we need people-powered public problem solving. How's that for alliteration? To help inform the approach. So buckle your seatbelts. Probably not the best metaphor here since we're walking, but we'll head into a rapid fire set of reflections and resources as we ask for your help to make walking a more safe and accessible activity and means of transportation in Maryland. So what can we do? Well, the first step, of course, is always to assess where we are, and we're fortunate in Maryland to, well, be in Maryland, which has an amazingly diverse range of environments, historical and natural resources that are great to explore by foot. So what's the problem? Well, exactly, that's what we need to do. Assess the situation, define the problem. Sometimes more difficult than it seems, because the point is for us as public problem solvers to poke at it and define it to a point that it's concrete and actionable. So the good news is that we have some great opportunities for walking here in Maryland, and are in fact known not only for our landmark destinations of the Promenade in Baltimore City, but also the Appalachian Trail, the C&O Canal, and across Maryland, we've, from the shore to the mountains in Garrett County, we have some really amazing opportunities to do good walking in Maryland. So what is the problem? The problem, as we started to speak to earlier, is not just Maryland's problem. It's a broader problem. The broader problem is that across the nation, we have been seeing the pedestrian fatalities increase over time. And I think that Danielle spoke to this a little bit. And this is a really important piece for us as transportation planners to take a closer look. And the picture's not quite so pretty. In Maryland, every year, MDOT presents what we call our attainment report, where we report on key performance measures to reflect on how we're meeting the goals and objectives we've established in our plans. And for pedestrians, despite how relatively good we're doing, it really hasn't been looking good. We've been seeing the number of fatalities and serious injuries for pedestrians on our roadways increase over many years, whereas fatalities for others who are driving have gone down. Also, Maryland has a very disappointing mode split when it comes to active transportation, with the latest figures showing 2.1% walking for their commute and less than 0.5% cycling. So drilling in a little bit closer on this issue, we have to ask, where are these safety issues occurring? And we have made an effort in our various planning processes to really establish where the problems lie and how we can address them. And we're asking you to also participate in that process. So our first stock take in the Bike Ped Master Plan, which we'll talk about later, was to look at the data and try to understand why these crashes were happening. Not that surprisingly, the big picture shows that our urban and suburban areas are particularly problematic, especially where former suburban thoroughfares have become more surrounded by development and destinations where people might want to walk. But let's look at the infrastructure. MDOT has pretty good data and reports annually on what is included in our state roadway network, including measures of what we call the bicycle level of comfort. We also monitor what is provided by way of linear feet, ADA accessible sidewalks. But this doesn't tell us much about how well we're actually helping people to get where they want to go. And if you'll recall the previous slide about mode split for active transportation, it would be fair to conclude that we're not doing so well. So in 2017, as part of our commuter choice effort, we commissioned a stratified sample survey conducted by statisticians, not me, about why people do or do not walk to work. And in the tradition of letting surveys tell you things that you kind of already know, it showed that the primary reason people in Maryland aren't walking to work is that it's just too far. And it would take too long to get there. For my fellow land use and transportation planners out there, this comes as no surprise. It's the land use. And if there's one thing that my decades worth work in transportation and land use planning have taught me, there's no amount of building infrastructure that's going to solve that ultimate problem. So what can we do? If we want to make our communities more walkable, we'll need to become more informed participants in the many small land use decisions that ultimately influence how livable our communities can be. Important transit factors aside, we can all have the complete streets. We can have all the complete streets in the world and still not be able to bike or walk to where we need to be. But the other interesting observation in the previous slide is, sorry about that. Here we go, sorry. Is that for those who do walk, the primary motivating factor cited was that first and foremost, it was for their health. And our current context has also helped highlight that there are plenty of other good reasons we should all probably be walking more than we do, dealing with the stress, the environment, the equity issues that have all really hit the foreground in our current world. But from where many of us are probably sitting right now, the current situation has also brought home, so to speak, the challenges of trying to make walkable communities work for people where they live. Maybe the commute to work is not the only important thing we should be paying attention to, and certainly our friends at AARP would agree that there's more to life's journey than the commute to work. It's certainly true that many transportation planners and engineers here have been encouraged to view the world through the goggles of our peak hour travel periods. For us, the problem to be solved has often been reducing congestion. And let's make no mistake, we have some of the country's worst right here in Maryland. But let's face it, problems are easier to find and solve if there are concrete, measurable outcomes that can be quantified, and that means data. And for planners, one of the primary sources is often the census, or ACS, in which the question is not about how you get around, but how and where you generally travel to work. So combine that with a healthy dose of data on average daily traffic volumes, and what do you expect? It's all too true that when your tool is a hammer, all your problems are nails. And if we could all use better data, and we could all use better data if we want to effectively define our problem as something other than a nail or the commute to work, so to speak, as the case may be. So let's try looking at the problem. Sorry about that. Let's try looking at the problem from where most of us are probably sitting right now, at home. It's often the best place to start, and the solutions as well as the problems may be right outside your door. For me, they were. Of course, being a nerdy transportation land use planner who moved to Maryland in part because of its history as a smart growth state, I was pleased to find an affordable home in what may have once been known as a streetcar suburb that had good proximity to a lot of key services, groceries, transit, restaurant, parks. It has a pretty good walk score, remember that? It's still online and does provide some alternative data about how people are getting to what they need. So in using my high-tech home office equipment, pen, paper, and cell phone, I developed this sophisticated diagram to illustrate a point. I live on a corner, and aside from proximity, we have a good network of sidewalks with land strip buffers from the street trees. I also have a good grocery store less than a block away. It's actually where the sun is here. So I see a lot of pedestrian activity. Also, in case you're wondering, I don't have a chimney, but that's just the way I learned to draw houses. But there's something wrong with this picture. People were walking in the street. Why not use the sidewalk? Well, a simple act of taking a walk helps assess and define the problem. Over time, the mature tree roots had grown under and made the sidewalks very uneven, treacherous for everybody. And in many cases, limbs had grown down, leaving insufficient headroom for walking. I'm short, so it didn't occur to me at first. Also, they say that good fences make good neighbors, but in my case, the fence is so close to the sidewalk that it impinges on space for walking, especially if you're carrying many arms full of groceries, as is often the case on my street. I've since taken action to address all these issues, along with judicious edging as well, to make sure it's nice and wide. But point being that when it comes to walking, we can all share a responsibility to see and be seen, and that as a first step towards safer walking environments, we need to be observant and to look up and look out. Pedestrians.org, there are some other great examples of how data shows how the existence of a sidewalk, a data point we don't always have, by the way, can actually look on the ground. So a great first step to answer what can we do is probably first and foremost to take a walk, particularly next Wednesday. Sorry. Take a walk, particularly next Wednesday, which is Walk Maryland Day, and it'll present a great opportunity for doing just that. October 7th was also scheduled to be Walk to School Day, but we know for many that is not in the cards. So you could use the opportunity to at least identify or try a decent route to any destination that suits you. Walk to a park, walk to a grocery store. There are many opportunities for us to begin thinking about how we can work walking more into our daily lives. Or organize a neighborhood walk. It can be a great way to gather information, document issues, data, or just simply to get to know your neighbors, which leads us to step 2. Strategizing. The next step in what can be done is to explore any problems in greater depth, identify potential solutions, in what many on this webinar may call planning. While professionally we have many specific techniques and methodologies to do this, we also recognize that as a practice in problem solving, we do not have a monopoly on good ideas, that we can often find more innovative solutions if we engage a broad range of perspectives and skill sets. For walking in particular, it's easy to lose the trees for the forest. It's human scale activity and problem, and a state level network analysis is going to make a lot more sense if it's accompanied by a firm sense of what's on the ground. And as such, a major theme in the recently updated Maryland Bike Ped Master Plan was that one of the best strategies to improve biking and walking was to help give people tools to do better planning and problem solving with us, to help better identify problems and get a better sense of what it takes to move from concept to building a project on the ground. And that's what we have been working on. But the data issue is still a major issue. One key need we identified was to make it easier for people to know where our off-road trail networks were located. We have the exciting opportunity that is now made live of having created a statewide inventory of all of our off-road routes. This is part of a broader statewide inventory that will include all bicycle-related infrastructure across the state, but is particularly important here because these are, for the most part, shared use paths that are also for walking. And it was a collaborative effort with nonprofits, state and local agencies, and MPO, Maryland Metropolitan Planning Organizations providing inputs, all reconciled and in many instances hand digitized using satellite imagery and digital elevation models to create a GIS database that we can now integrate and overlay with other information in our state GIS inventory to support all kinds of analysis. And this is not just a tool for government agencies, but an online mapping application that can help inform a broader range of innovative and critical thinking about where we need to go from here. Although not exactly crowdsourced in the way that term is commonly used, it certainly owes its existence and accuracy to the broad range of inputs and corrections based on boots on the ground. The data is in turn being integrated, skip through that one, being integrated into another exciting effort we have underway at MDOT to develop a statewide level of traffic stress analysis. LTS, as we call it, for those who may not be familiar, is a measure that reflects key roadway characteristics such as speeds, land and shoulder widths, land use and shoulder widths, to help clarify how accessible any given road segment or route might be for cyclists at any level, distinguishing routes for road warriors from those that might be comfortable for a family with children. This too is being built to integrate with our broader statewide GIS mapping capabilities. And it's being shared out to help local planning agencies or other citizen planners, for that matter, participate in the analysis and problem solving, and to prioritize the use of our limited resources towards projects that will help improve accessibility for all users, or indeed towards projects that might best remediate inequities of access across the network. It will also provide us with much better performance metrics for measuring progress in accessing all of these needs. When we're able to collect better statewide sidewalk data, a rather daunting task that we're nonetheless exploring, we hope to ultimately extend this kind of data and methodology to understand how network variations affect pedestrian access. Fortunately, meanwhile, Maryland is also well positioned to take advantage of what is emerging as an exciting new development at the national level. Our record of attention to land use development issues as the home of smart growth has left us well positioned in terms of data and awareness to move on recent recommendations at the national level through the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, which proposes a more refined attention to how land use should influence roadway design. You'll be hearing more about MDOT SHA's recently released context-driven guide if you tune in on October 15th. But as a teaser, let me assure you that it provides a great new resource to inform collective engagement around the design decisions that will affect walkability in your community. It is already informing some major safety interventions in the state. And as MDOT SHA continues to refine it, it will be a great way to build common understanding of how decisions regarding types of design treatments can be reached. So finally, a great example of how collective strategizing can achieve walkability in Maryland is the Sustainable Communities Program. Administered by our Department of Housing and Community Development, MDOT has helped shape this and implement this 10-year-old program, which won the APA Award for Excellence in Sustainability in 2017. For our purposes, it is particularly interesting to note that in developing strategies to revitalize and strengthen existing communities, the importance of walking, trails, and walkability has become an increasingly common and important theme. And fortunately, this gives us another opportunity to collaborate on deployment of resources. The collaborative state program is another great example of what we can do and how effective joint strategizing in turn results in eligibility for program funding to take the next step, which is action and implementation. So the Sustainable Communities process sets the applicants up for direct eligibility for many grant programs, as you'll see listed here. And this, of course, money is where a lot of the key issues about making things happen comes down. And so we want to quickly run through some of those resources just so everybody is aware. All of these are on our website. I don't want to belabor them. So just here's our website, and here are the range of projects that we have to offer. But one that many of you may not consider when it comes to thinking of pedestrian access is the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority. And it's another great example and resource of how collective strategy can translate into actionable outcomes. Moreover, this program can also serve as a great resource in promoting walk access and community partnerships for walkability. In addition to infrastructure, a great example is a recent project to support trip planning along the C&O Canal. Moreover, as a result, the heritage areas can provide great opportunities and resources for walking in Maryland, many of which can be particularly great to visit this month as fall color settles in. We've compiled many of these and other resources on our Walktober website. The next important thing to note about acting to promote walkability is that advocacy is a key component. It's a great way to identify partners that can help bring issues to the attention of people who are empowered to address them. And we have a great advisory committee in Maryland that helps us do just that. Our next meeting is October 23rd, also on our website, so feel free to join. One of our members takes advocacy to a whole new level by hosting a series called Perils for Pedestrians, which has a byline of TV talk for people who walk. It is broadcast on several public access stations across the country and can be found on YouTube or at pedestrians.org. So advocacy is an important way of taking action, and part of the reason that we're here today, to heighten awareness and encourage people to pay attention, as is reflected in several safety messaging efforts by MDOT that you'll learn about on October 15th. And advocacy is more effective if we can lead by example. So another thing we can do is to consider how to integrate walking better into our everyday lives. And at MDOT, we recognize our role here is in part to make this easier for people, hence the commuter choice efforts, which can also be found on our website. Finally, to bring this back to the start at home idea, MDOT, who manages the BWI airport, has taken steps to lead by example by developing walking and biking opportunities both in and around the airport to serve both employees and travelers. And it's also enjoyed by many of us in the surrounding communities. So these general notes to start us off, we're hoping that all of you walking experts out there can join us in the process of assessing, strategizing, and implementing solutions, and in joining the discussion of what can we do, because we need people-powered solutions to help solve for people-powered mobility and access to make walking a better option for all of us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michael Baer, because we really want to hear your thoughts, ideas, and questions on everything you've heard and how we can help you move forward to make walkability work. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Marty. And thanks to everybody today. So we've gotten a number of questions here. I know we're getting close to 11, so I think we'll try to go a few minutes over, and I'll ask the panelists to kind of turn on their webcams as we transition into the Q&A. Appreciate everybody here today. I guess the first question we'll start with, and Ian, you are up on there. I know Marty's turning hers on, and Danielle is now up here. So one of the questions came up when we were having this conversation about the session today was, looking at it from both the state of Maryland perspective with MDOT and AARP and what Ian's been doing, kind of been an interesting group of presenters today. And maybe, Marty, if you want to start kind of telling us how all this has come together and how you all might be working together in the future on these initiatives.
Well, I guess, there are many good reasons that we have all found each other, but, it's interesting that we all started from our different perspectives and problem solving. And for us, it was partially through the process of trying to develop our bike ped master plan that we realized we weren't really hearing the voice of people that wanted to walk. I mean, the bicycle advocates can be very vocal, and they tend to, take over the room when you raise the question of how we can promote biking and walking. And so we looked to America Walks and found AARP through that process, but also through the intervention of our Department of Health, who is helping host the Maryland Walks Day, the Walk Maryland Day on October 7th. But Ian helped bring us together, and he has a greater history with how he has established the partnering process across the country.
Well, maybe just jumping in there, I think one of the things we've learned is that these community change projects are much more effective, much more successful if multiple different stakeholders come together and those different perspectives. We all need to get out of our silos And it's one of the things that I've really seen Maryland state government leading on, with all of the partnerships between transportation and health and planning. And you mentioned another agency, Marty, in your presentation. Was it community development and housing or something like that? That's really part of the same initiative. So we do encourage those multi-jurisdictional partnerships, but also going outside of government to organizations like AARP, representing older adults, YMCA and the school systems, representing younger people, social services agencies, representing underserved neighborhoods. The business community as well can be a great partner. And certainly, when I'm trying to organize a process to improve walkability in a community, everybody's welcome at the table, and there's usually a way to engage each group.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just jump in as well. Just I think from AARP's perspective, I think we offer a few kind of unique things to the mix, which is not only our perspective. I think to your point, it's important to hear from all segments of society, and oftentimes older adults, the needs of older adults is either forgotten or overlooked or not appropriately, sort of sought. So that's one of the things that we do bring. But the other thing that we bring is this incredibly powerful core of volunteers. I mean, AARP's volunteers are our lifeblood. We have 60,000 volunteers across the US that do everything from leading walk audits, as I know is the case there in AARP Maryland, to standing up before City Council to testify why we need Vision Zero policy and much more. So our volunteers are really the muscle that sort of brings our work to life. And I think between that and the fact that we can sort of present, in some ways, an unexpected voice in these matters. People expect to hear from AARP on things like Medicare and Social Security, but they don't expect to hear from us on pedestrian safety. But it is as important to the health and well-being of older adults as those other two things. So I do think that we know that we can't do our work alone. No one expects that we are ever going to be the experts on design of streets, nor do we expect to be, but that is exactly why we partner with America Walks and other organizations around the US and work so closely with departments of transportation to affect that change.
Great, thanks, Danielle. Next question here is, how do you suggest getting our community involved in making changes to our local pedestrian network? Who wants to take that on first?
Well, I think one of the best starting places is a walking event or a walking program. If there's not already a history or a culture of walking or advocating for changes in the street design to make an environment safer and more enjoyable for walking, find a location where it is safe to do a walk and organize a walk. It could be a neighborhood walk, it could be a walk to school day, and next Wednesday is International Walk to School Day and Maryland Walk to School Day. If kids are in school at the moment, which I know many are not, then that's a great time to, it doesn't take a lot of organization. It doesn't have to involve the entire school, but get with your neighbors if you have kids attending the same school, especially at the elementary age, and start that walk and gradually build up more walking events and programs, research best practices in changing communities, and then start building an advocacy movement, engaging with local government, engaging with state government about how there can be policy and public funding priority changes that will eventually lead to environmental changes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, that was part of what I was trying to say. The first step is just to, get out there and then meet the people that can help you understand and problem solve.
Okay, thanks, Marty. Next question here is, hi, I'm from Montgomery Parks. It appears to me that there are some decent numbers of the grant opportunities, and we are trying to improve park access. Is there a particular grant that we should look at?
Yeah, it's great that you've asked that question. One of the speakers that we'll have later this month is from the Department of Natural Resources. They are very engaged in trying to solve around the problem of park access. We do have several resources on our site that I pointed to earlier. There's a National Recreational Trails Program, and we also have within our state highway administration a sidewalk retrofit program. So if the issue is trying to get across a state highway to access a park, that can be a potential source. One of the cool things about our Bikeways program, which we run from here at the Secretary's office in MDOT, and Nate Evans done a great job at it, is that we can support shared use paths. I mean, it's called Bikeways, but we certainly engage with pedestrians and encourage that as an approach to addressing these problems.
I might just offer too, I mean, I think the idea of looking for grants to support pedestrian activity can be pretty broad. I mean, you can think about health foundations, you can think about organizations that are interested in placemaking and economic development. You can think about organizations that are specifically around physical activity and sort of mobility and transportation, right? So it's like there's a lot of different corners to turn when you think about grants to support pedestrian work. Again, I'll just put a plug in for our challenge grant program, community challenge grant program. We'll open it up next February probably, and that has done a lot of really interesting and creative placemaking and transportation related work in communities. But you know, you might think about how you can support pedestrian activity through those other mechanisms by doing a placemaking demonstration project that might just require a small amount of funds, maybe for some paint or for some supplies. Start small, build the momentum, build the stakeholders, build the demand, because that's what really makes those grant applications so compelling, is when you can show that you've got a diverse group of stakeholders working with you and that you're hitting a lot of these key areas of health and activity and safety and mobility.
And America Walks has a similar program. We call ours, I think, Community Change Grants. They're $1,500 grants, so very small grants, but just like you said, Danielle, there are some really significant changes that you can make, or events that you can organize, or campaigns that you can run with a small amount of money. And our community change grant process, I believe, is going to open up later this month in October. And if you're not already receiving America Walks e-newsletter, just go to americawalks.org, sign up there, and you'll see the notification when that comes out.
Great, thanks, Ian. We'll just have a couple more questions before we close out today. We actually have a question specifically for Danielle, which is, what have you heard from your members regarding transportation needs during COVID-19?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. We just actually finished a survey with our age-friendly members. So these are those 500 or so communities that are a part of our network. And we polled them, we surveyed them specifically on how they had adjusted to COVID-19, what were some of the things that really surged in terms of importance for them. And we heard very loud and clear that you know, their primary needs and interests in the time of COVID-19 response was ensuring that older adults had access to information, ensuring that older adults had a way to remain engaged in civic social life, you know, virtually particularly, and then of course ensuring access to food and medicine. And what we saw is that a lot of our age-friendly communities that had in place volunteer driver programs that that matched older adults who need transportation needs with volunteers who are willing to provide those rides for free. A lot of those volunteer driver programs disappeared because volunteers were nervous about exposure, older adult riders were nervous about exposure, but instead those programs pivoted and became delivery mechanisms. So those then became the way to get food and medicine to older adults in their homes. But that still didn't solve for how do you get people where they need to go, which is, you know, their dialysis appointment or out to lunch with a friend, or frankly, they just want to pick out their own broccoli and they don't want to have it picked out by a, you know, by Instacart or something like that. So we've seen a lot of really creative solutions. Often it's that sort of, you know, neighbor to neighbor connection that fills that gap. We have seen definitely, and I'll invoke here from our transportation workshop, the needs of older adults, their reliance upon public transit did not go away. I mean, there are many older adults who are very much dependent on public transit. And when that service began to decline or shrink or become modified, it really presented a problem for them. So a good number of communities, one we heard about a couple weeks ago in Georgia, used some of their CARES Act funding to make public transit free for all riders, first for older adults and then for all riders. So I think what we're hearing from our members is certainly that, you know, transportation needs are not being adequately met. We know that there's still remaining needs in public transit, but also we are seeing that, you know, they're turning to things like walking and biking, at least to get some exercise. I think about my neighbor here who takes her daily stroll. That's pretty much the only time I see her leave her house. Everything else is kind of brought to her. So those opportunities are now as important now as they ever have been.
Thanks, Danielle. Actually, here's one that just came in that kind of follows up on it from Marcy Lefevre, I think, and she is with Hyattsville. So she wanted to thank us, or thank you, for highlighting Hyattsville's age-friendly action plan. Her question is, during COVID-19, older residents have expressed concern about being outside, even in small groups, practicing physically distanced measures, such as wearing a face masks. Do you have any guidance or tips for organizing and leading walks that take COVID-19 safety measures into consideration? Also, do you have examples of communities that include persons with disabilities in wheelchairs in walking activities?
Well, I'll jump in and then maybe I'll pivot to Ian, who I think probably has some really good observations on that. I can say from AARP's perspective, in the interest of the health of our members, we are not doing any group activities right now. So we are really putting all of that on pause until we can be sure that people are safe. Having said that, we do want to encourage people to gather with friends or maybe family members and use that walk audit worksheet, for example, as a way to at least, you know, familiarize themselves with their built environment, build up some data, you know, acquire some information over time that can be used once we all get back together to advocate for change. But to the question of different levels of abilities, I know for a fact that our AARP state offices across the US that have done work audits have done so in a very inclusive way to accommodate people of different needs and abilities. But Ian, I think you probably have some examples from your network as well.
Yeah, I want to mention a resource that Walk to Connect produced early in the pandemic, and I'll send that again to Marty and Michael so it can be distributed to everybody who attended.
I think we're having a little trouble hearing you, Ian.
Ian, are you muted?
He is not
So
muted.
all of their okay, so Michael, everybody's hearing me?
Well, you were muted for some reason for a bit, but we can hear you again. So maybe you want to repeat that briefly?
Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah, so Walk to Connect coordinates walking movement leaders across the country, including Maryland, to lead recreational walks or special interest walks, social engagement walks. And initially, when the pandemic hit, they did instruct all their leaders to suspend all walks. But after a month or two, they came out with a set of guidance regarding the number of people, regarding sort of self-evaluating your health condition before you attend a walk, wearing masks, distancing, bringing your own water bottle, and so on. So it's a great little toolkit. I'll send that to Marty and to you, Michael, to distribute to everybody here who wants to start organizing walks and wants to know that they're going to keep everybody safe.
Yeah, and if I can just chime in quickly, our Department of Natural Resources has also done a great job at helping alert people as to how they can be safe on the trails in our state parks. And, you know, some of the issues that we've encountered, that, you know, the state parks are just overwhelmed with visitors these days. But being particularly careful where, you know, trails connect or people might be likely to congregate. I mean, always, you know, have your mask. Might take it, you know, down a little bit when you're, you know, nobody else is around. But we will hear from them also later about some of the social distancing techniques that are specific to walking trails in Maryland. And always check the park beforehand. Most of the parks are open again, but at the early stages of the pandemic, a lot of them just had to close down because the parking lots and other places were simply too crowded to be safe.
Great, thanks, Marty. Since we're a little over right now, I think we'll close up, but I wonder if you all just want to offer some final thoughts, and maybe we'll start with Ian and Danielle, and then Marty, maybe you can talk a bit about our next couple of topics, and then we'll close.
Yeah, sure. Well, just to re-emphasize, communities that are designed well for walking are really great communities in so many ways. For the public health of the residents, for reducing the carbon footprint, for increasing safety, both transportation safety and safety from crime, for supporting and stimulating local economic activity, as was illustrated in Batesville, for quality of life, for children and older adults and people with disabilities, for equitable access to transportation and mobility. If a community focuses on redesigning, reimagining, and then redesigning itself to be great for pedestrians, all of those great community goals will be accomplished as well. So I encourage everybody to work on this in your own communities.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Ian said, as well as I really appreciate Marty's points that, you know, this really comes down to land use and how we're designing our communities as a whole. That those are really big systemic changes that take a long time to fix, but that shouldn't stop us from making quick changes now. The other thing I want to sort of leave people with is something that's just resonated with me since our transportation workshop, which Marty also alluded to. You know, the data that we have primarily maps people's driving to work. So, one of our speakers on our transportation workshop said that 20% of our trips are commuting. That means 80% are not. So start to explore what that 80% of your transportation portfolio looks like and how we can make changes within that. Like, let it not just be focused on the commute. That is important, but again, not everyone commutes, right? Children don't, not all older adults do, not even all adults do. But everybody has some share of that other 80% of trips. And how do we start to peel off parts of those trips that can be used in a more age-friendly way? And again, to Ian's point, those also deliver a lot of other benefits: environmental, economic, social, community health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Thanks. Yeah, and from my perspective, I would really emphasize the safety message. We didn't go into a lot of depth on it in this presentation because we'll be hearing a lot more about the safety issues in Maryland in our next October 15th Walkinar. But it is the NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation Administration, Safety Administration, and they have declared this as a pedestrian safety month. So there is a heightening awareness around safety issues. And we're encouraging people to participate and do that kind of fine-grained problem solving around the immediate safety issues in your neighborhoods. But we'll also be hearing from our Department of Health about some of the great initiatives that they've been able to pursue, for example, with Ian's group, Miracle Walks. And finally, we'll hear from our MDOT SHA folks about their context-driven effort, which is really centered on that land use issue and how we need to better integrate our thinking about our transportation networks into how our land use is evolving and making sure that we are keeping up with where people want to walk so that they can do it safely.
Great. Thanks, Marty. Thanks, everybody. Today with that, I think we'll conclude the webinar, What Can We Do to Advance Walking and Walkability? I'd like to offer a great big thank you to Marty Baker, Ian Thomas, and Danielle Arigoni for a great presentation, to everybody who attended today, and to Francine Waters and Brittany Brothers of MDOT who helped to pull this program together with us. The complete recording of today's webinar will be posted online next week. Participants will be sent an email with the link. When you exit from today's webinar, you'll be asked to participate in a short evaluation. Please take a few moments to provide feedback so that we can continue the webinar experience for you. As Marty mentioned, the next program in this Walktober webinar series, Pedestrian Infrastructure, Safety and Health, will be at 9:30 a.m. Eastern on Thursday, October 15th, 2 weeks from today. Please join us for that and have a great day.